My guest today is director Carrie Heine, who has with a particular interest in portraying narratives that explore the themes of coming of age, human connection, and mental health in film. Now, her first short film, Last Dance, premiered at the 2019 Underwire Film Festival in London, where it was nominated for Best U25 Production. Now, since then, her visually distinct style has led to collaborations with brands and artists such as Puma and Tinder, Dua Lipa, as well as Red Bull Racing, one of my favorites, I have to say, and Amazon. But her newest short film, Diary of a Ghost, is an emotional, poignant film that focuses on a young woman, a lost love, and the devastating toll that grief can have on a person's mental health. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome director Carrie Heine and her short film, Diary of a Ghost, to the show. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
You're very welcome. And I have to say, I really like this film. It's very emotional, very powerful. But how did you come across the screenplay and why did you want to direct this one?
So the writer Maren, she's a good friend of mine. We met years ago in London. We worked in the same vintage store, and we kind of just stayed in touch over the years. And I knew she was writing loads, but she mainly writes long form, loads of feature films, TV series mainly, and yeah, we always chatted about work, and I was mainly working in commercials and fashion. I'd taken a step back from narrative to focus on things that can financially sustain you, I guess. And yeah, we were chatting, and she's like, "Oh, I've got this script. I'm thinking of making it into a film because I need to get my work out there. You know, my scripts just sit on my laptop." Yeah, so she sent it to me just to hear my thoughts, and it wasn't even a matter of like, do you want to direct it? It was just a check it out type of thing. And I read it, and I've been toying with the idea of going back to narrative, or I've been wanting to go back to narrative and short films. And I read it, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. I read the script, and it just had so much depth to it, and so much depth to the characters, and so many underlying tones and messages that you need to try and communicate in such a short time. And coming from commercials where you don't really do character development, or you don't really speak to your actors or models or whoever is in front of camera, that just felt really exciting to finally see a story that I could really see myself immersing myself into for, you know, a longer period of time. And yeah, we just kind of chatted loads about it, and it just kind of grew from there. And both of us were like, let's make this film. If we get funding, great. If not, we'll pay for it ourselves, which is what we ended up doing. um, so yeah, it was super organic, and it wasn't planned at all. It just, yeah, over several sort of 6 to 8 hour long phone calls, we're like, I guess we're doing this now.
Well, you know, grief is a complex emotion. Everybody processes it differently. So, what was your vision and thought process for this film to showcase how complex grief really is?
Mm. It's so interesting because another reason that really drew me to the script was that, you know, you don't really talk about grief. It's not exactly a dinner conversation, obviously, and it's something that's so difficult to speak about, even if it's not you going through it, but if it's somebody else and you're trying to, you know, be a good friend and be there for them. It's this kind of like, I don't know what to say. Like, do I try to talk to them about it? Do I try to distract them? And it's so difficult because it's not something we know a lot about. And doing research for this film, I realized how little research there has been done into grief. And this script, it's based on loosely on a true experience by the writer. So she had a family member. So her grandma passed away, and her mum really struggled with the loss, of course, and kind of she would dream of her mother, and because she would see her in her dreams, she'd go to bed really early, get up really late, And it just escalated to a point where it wasn't healthy anymore, and the family had to step in and say, this isn't the right way of coping. You have to get out of it and find a different way of dealing with it, and we'll help you to do that. So the idea came from what happens to a person that doesn't have that safety net around them, that doesn't have a family member or friend that steps in and says, we need to stop this right now. And it was so interesting because even when making the film, so many of the people I work with are good friends of mine or I've been working with for years. And then while making this project, they would tell me these stories of people they had lost. And I was like, I didn't even know that. I've known you for years, and I never knew that you'd lost a brother or one of your parents or a childhood friend of yours, because again, it's not something you talk about. So that's where we kind of started a lot of the research, and the idea was always to have these sort of two worlds, kind of like the story of the mum, where I guess sleep and her dreams were her sort of safety net and where she felt comfortable because she was with that person, and the outside world suddenly feeling really scary and overwhelming and cold, and you're actually just trying to get through your day as quickly as possible to go back into that little safe bubble. So that was kind of the foundation that informed everything.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, this one was, you know, grief, and this was a different way of looking at it because I'm always looking at grief as an emotion that someone is dealing with.
Mm.
In this case, you have a character that really showed the emotional toll grief can have on a person, but they take it a step farther. So they're living in reality, but then they have the alternate reality, which is really just the imagination in which they cling to, which is really the only thing that gives them a sense of peace in the
Mm.
situation. And this is really the first time I've ever seen grief portrayed like this. And for you, you had actress Genevieve, is it Schenauer? Is that how you pronounce
Chanel.
it? Shanae? And so, um, because when I saw her, she's playing the part of Sage, I could feel her struggle with
Yeah,
grief in this film. I
fantastic.
mean, what was it like directing her?
I mean, it was incredible. She came on super early. She came on before we even had a producer. So in the beginning, it was just me, Marin, the writer, and Genevieve. And when we first started thinking about who do we know, who can we get involved in this, I I'd known Genevieve because I was on a shoot with her a couple of years ago on a commercial that I was a runner on, and she was doing some sort of underwater things, and so that's where we met. But other than me bringing her coffees, we didn't really connect much other than that. And yeah, so I initially started making a list of actresses I knew, and I knew we needed someone that had that kind of haunted quality. And one of our big character references was Nell Crane from The Haunting of Hill House, who's so, she doesn't have an awful lot of dialogue. And just through her expressions and her gestures, you can tell how, yeah, that she's haunted by something, and for a long time you don't really know what it is, but you know that there's something that happened in the past that informs the way she is now. So I knew I needed someone who can really communicate all these feelings and emotions without having to say them in dialogue. And yeah, so when Genevieve came on board, I reached out to her, and she had actually just lost two people she was quite close to. So when I was sending her the script, I was like, I don't know if this is actually the right time for you to read it. It might be a little too, too fresh for you. But yeah, we had some Zoom calls, and she just understood the script and the character so well. And obviously, going through that herself at that point in time, she could bring so many of her own experiences into the character and draw from so many of her real emotions. And
Her
yeah, it's
eyes, yeah, and it
incredible.
was her eyes that that told the story.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So a lot of the preparation, we just had Zoom calls with her and Mara, and we just talked about things, related to the script, not related to the script, to really get to know each other. And yeah, we'd always bring in like little ideas of like, how the character might dress, like how would she do her makeup? Would she even do her makeup? Like what are little things she would do. So we were like, okay, she would definitely sort of like do all of this like nervous playing with her hands and like trying to hide herself. So we're like, okay, she has to wear like a big jumper that she can kind of try to disappear in. So we kind of built this character over months and months and months. And yeah, it was incredible to then finally see it come to life. And I made a playlist in advance that I sent to her, and I listened to it loads in pre-production to just get into the right mindset. And it was good that we had so much time together, I think, in advance, because we shot the film over 2 days. So I knew we only have like, two takes for each of the shots. So if we're not nailing it, we're not going to finish this film. And Genevieve and like all the other actors were incredible at just delivering amazing performance every single time we started rolling the camera. And Genevieve she really stayed in character for loads of it. So you've got all these BTS photos of her with like her headphones on, like listening to the playlist and like just trying to find moments of calm on like an insanely busy set. But yeah, it was incredible because everything I was giving her, she would then give me something even better back. So it was so much fun.
Yeah, because as in the film, because you're really on her, you're following her emotional journey. So when Sage says that she's fine, what she is really saying is that she doesn't know how to tell those around her how she really feels and how to move on or how to save her from herself. And so I was reading some of the information and I was really kind of surprised that only 1 out of 3 people seek treatment for their grief and their mental health. That
Yeah.
means that means over 60% are dealing with it on their own.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? And once you research it, you realize how little help there is, or how little, especially with this particular condition, which is called prolonged grief disorder. There's very little research or knowledge about um, how it works and what you can do, and how you can help people or help yourself if you're the one affected. Um, and I think the craziest thing is that it'll affect everyone at some point in their lives. So it's incredible to me that there's so little knowledge around it. I mean, I hadn't even heard of that condition before we made this film. Um, so yeah, I think it's a topic that's so relevant to everyone, unfortunately, at some point. Yet nobody really talks about or wants to talk about.
Well, and that's the thing about this film. We're looking at what Sage is going through, but you're also looking at the reactions of the people that are around her. And so, of course, one of her friends kind of knows, but she doesn't really lend that extra helping hand per se. And that would be a normal reaction from most people. And but Sage, the thing that I noticed in this film, because I'm like, okay, where's the connection coming from? And then there it was. So she was wearing her late boyfriend's t-shirt, but then it was a sign that she's not ready to let go, which isn't a completely bad thing. But the t-shirt was the one in the photo in the paper, at the pub, and on the wall in her grandmother's house. So it was a constant reminder everywhere she goes, and she wasn't ready to let go. So then I kept looking at the areas and where the photos were. So the one place, the pub, that was a negative reminder. But then at home, it was a place of solitude. but she embraces his memory there. She didn't embrace it at the pub. So there was two aspects of dealing with the loss. I thought the contrast was brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think again it plays so into that having your safe space versus we always just called it the outside world when we were shooting it, and yeah, her having that, her just being left by herself. So it's sort of set. Imagine after finishing school, everyone kind of moves away, everyone goes on their own journey. And in the beginning, it's mentioned that her grandma's in a care home. So suddenly, this character that's going through something so incredibly traumatic is just completely left by herself. So this house becomes her little sanctuary and her bubble where she can feel safe and, not happy, but I guess comfortable, or as comfortable as she can feel at that point in time. Whereas everything else outside feels overwhelming and intense. And especially in the office scene, you notice it a lot where the sound design and everything just becomes too much for her. And with the photo in the pub scene, especially, I think it's because it comes unexpected for her. She doesn't. It's already difficult for her to go and meet her friend that's back in town. She's not the type of person that would go to the pub after finishing work. So she's already kind of a fish out of the water. And then suddenly, when she least expects it, she's confronted with that image of that newspaper cutting. And it just brings everything back that she's been trying to keep below the surface for the sake of getting through, this meeting with her friend. And at that point, she can't keep it in anymore. It just kind of bubbles out of her. But at the same time, it's been such a long time that she can't really express her grief or like express what she's feeling or even wants to talk to a friend about it, because it's been such a long time at this point that she's like, well, I've been going through this for a year by myself now. Like, how do you want to help me now? And whereas at home, it's like like a comfortable reminder of building this sort of fantasy world and living in this, reality, in her reality.
It is because the home setting, that
Mm,
was her hiding place. She could be at home and just, she could relive the time she had with him, but she was also trying to live what would have life been like if he was still alive. And even at her job, people don't realize that grief for some people, it steals everything away. It steals their focus. They
mm,
don't do their job as effectively or as efficiently as before. Life is no longer fun. And the way she was sitting there at her desk, she would have rather been at home. I mean, she was basically looking at the clock, waiting to go home. But then her friend disrupts the whole plan and says, "Look, I'm taking no for an answer. You're going to meet me at the pub, and we're gonna spend some time together." She didn't want to go.
yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. It's that sort of ripping her out of her routine that she's built for herself, which helps her keep her walls up. And yeah, especially in the office, like it was such an interesting scene to shoot, and it was actually something we added onto the script later on because initially that scene wasn't there, and then when kind of prepping and planning everything, we're like, we need another scene that kind of establishes this character and her everyday life a bit more for us to understand or get some first hints of what she might be going through and understand how she's feeling and why this sort of everyday life for her is so unbearable, and then interrupt that moment with her friend coming back into town and wanting to see her.
Yeah, when I was thinking about the friend, and then I was trying to put myself in Sage's place. I'm like, okay, so she's super comfortable being at home. She can just live in the memory is what she's doing. She's not even processing the grief. She's living in the memory because it's comfortable for her. The friend telling her, "You're going to meet me here. and I'm not taking no for an answer. So the positive side to that is that her friend getting her away from that. So I'm like, okay, that's one moment. That's the type of moment that a true friend would keep going back to the person or keep going back to Sage and pulling them away, because for a whole year, Sage ingrained this way of life to where it was a part of her. And the only way out, it was going to take another person to pull her away and not allow her to ever go back. The only problem was the friend was only passing through because there was no other friends or close friends that were even around her to pull her out of that and get her into a new environment to learn how to have fun again. And
Absolutely.
because, yeah, because, with grief in this situation, and that's why this film perfectly portrays this. It's like you're caught in quicksand, and the only way to get out is you got to have somebody pulling you out. And she had nobody pulling her out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I love that you said like she knows she's not processing the grief, like she's embracing it, almost
Yeah.
wanting more of not the grief but that sort of world she's built herself, and getting just deeper and more lost in that reality she's made up for herself, rather than um, processing it with a diary. And that's why we also chose a diary as the kind of starting point, because I guess quite often a diary or journal is like recommended of to work through something, get your thoughts out of your head, put it all on a page. But again, we had that thought of what happens if you take that too far. What happens if you rewrite the story that you had with somebody, rather than working through your feelings and your grief and what you should be doing. So she then, it starts off as something positive, and then suddenly it becomes her just rewriting the story that she had with her partner. And then at that point in time, it gets to the anniversary of his death. So that written story also can't continue, which ends up being that trigger point for her.
Yeah, because the thing is, and you're right, journaling is part of the process. But what she did is she turned it around.
Mm,
Instead of using it as a process to heal, she started engaging with the memory. And that's where that fine line between reality and imagination started to cross.
exactly, exactly. And I think at the end of the day, as you said, like that journaling or that diary, that can never replace a genuine human interaction with friends or a family member. And it only got to the point it is now where we meet her in the film because she didn't have that around her. Whereas I think if her friends had stayed, if not everybody had left to go to university or whatever, it might have never escalated to that point, because you would have had to speak to people about it at some point. It would have come up. Someone would have noticed, the state the house is in, and like, what is this diary you're writing? Like, what are you actually achieving with it? So yeah, it's that sort of just complete loneliness, and at that point also not wanting to admit to yourself anymore that it's not healthy what you're doing. She's still telling herself like, oh, I'm just working through it, but we know it's not.
Yeah, it's kind of like telling an alcoholic, you need to stop drinking. No, I don't have a problem. So that's what she was
Exactly.
doing. But the thing is, and this is what this film shows, when people see this film, one of the things I was watching and learning, and this happens with so many people, letting go doesn't mean to forget. And so many people feel guilty of letting go because they think that if I choose to let go, I'm going to forget. And it's the forgetting part that hurts the worst. So
Mm.
your film portrays that exact feeling and that emotion perfectly.
Thank you, thank you. I'm glad that that all came across, because I think, as I said in the beginning, there's so many layers to it and so much subtext that you're trying to communicate that's not in the dialogue. and you have such a short amount of time to try and get all of this backstory across, to explain how did this character get here, why are they the way they are, and why does what's happening right now affect them the way it does. So yeah, I'm glad that translated.
Well, there was something in this film that truly caught my eye because it's probably one of the greatest quotes ever written. And I've done numerous interviews about grief with grief experts. But in this film, I know writer Jamie Anderson gave us one of the greatest quotes ever written. And grief is just love with no place to go. And when I saw that line, I went, oh my gosh. Because I've quoted that line so many times, and to see it in this film, it it made the film complete. Because yeah, it just summed up the whole film perfectly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny because that voiceover over the final scene was again something that we just added later on. It wasn't in the original script. It was only going to end on that. I always knew it was going to be a one shot. So it was just going to end on that shot of the diary closing. And we went the edit and we had a first version that we were quite happy with. And obviously, with that single take, there wasn't any editing that needed doing in the first place. And we sent it out to a couple of friends where we're like, we trust your feedback. We know you can be critical. You're not going to, tell us lies to make us happy. And a good friend of mine who always gives great criticism, he was like, like I love this final scene, but I feel like it'd be nice to know what's in her diary or like know a little bit more. So me and Mara and the writer started chatting and we're like, what if we do this voiceover and we take little snippets of what she might have written as that final diary entry and just pick some little bits and pieces out of it. And we recorded quite a lot more, but it became a bit too convoluting if we had put everything in. So yeah, that was something we only did later on where we're like, we feel like we can add a bit more. And yeah, I'm so glad we did because it's one of my favorite. I mean, that final scene is like my favorite part of the entire film, but that voiceover makes such a difference. And even with that, when we recorded that with Genevieve, I know she used the voiceover from Is It Gone Girl as a reference quite a lot of what to do with her voice and that again that sort of haunted quality. So yeah, I'm so glad we added that because it helps the film a lot.
Yeah, it really ties it all together. And I'm not going to give the ending away for people who have never seen this film. I didn't see it coming, but grief can push a person too far, which is why grief should never be dealt with alone. And that's what this whole film is about. Dealing with grief by yourself when you don't have to. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. And I don't know why so many people feel that it is. One of the things that has always bothered me with grief, and I know people that I'm not going to mention names, but there are people, and I think parents are probably some of the worst. And I don't mean worse as being bad. If a parent loses a child, the parent has two choices. You can wear that loss as a label for the rest of your life, and everybody in your neighborhood is going to know you as, oh, yeah, that's the couple that lost their son or lost their daughter because of the way that they always act and portray themselves. Or you can take the other road and learn how to process grief and go live your life. Yes, you lost someone, but don't stop living. Because you lost them doesn't mean you have to lose yours. And there's two ways, and I've seen it. And I mean, to me, there's nothing more heartbreaking than and a lot of people don't know that they're known for a label, but to be known as, oh yeah, that's so and so because they lost somebody. And I'm like, that's what you're going to be known for? Your
Yeah,
legacy is going to be grief?
yeah. I think that's the thing of it's. I think it's so easy to let something like that define you and be your entire narrative going forward if you can't process it in a healthy way and move forward, and that just being like a tiny part of the puzzle that I guess is makes you as a person. And that little part is always going to be there and it has a
Yeah.
right to be there, but it doesn't have to be the whole picture of it all. And it's we actually used like the metaphor of a puzzle quite a lot with this film. um, because as you said earlier, like you didn't see the ending coming. Like I didn't when I got the script for the first time. I read it and I was like, oh my God, like she did what?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I read it
That's, I was, yeah, but you, I'm, I don't want to use those words. You made it more heart wrenching because she was wearing his t-shirt.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
I was like, because when the scene came forward, I was
Mm,
sitting there and I was like, oh no. I mean, I'm like, okay, I can get the one part, but then you had to add
you had it,
the
yeah.
emotional side, but you had to tie it together, and that's how you tied it together, and you couldn't have done it more perfect than that.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because you have all these little pieces, and because what happened to me was when I read the script for a second time, I picked up on all these little details, and I was like, oh, of course, like I should have seen that coming. Like all the signs were kind of, you know, there. And when I was researching grief, that came up quite often of, people that had lost somebody saying, I never saw this coming. They seemed really happy. And this is a total shock. But then in retrospective, I should have been able to read the signs, but I didn't manage to piece the puzzle together and read the message until it was maybe too late. So
Yeah.
that's something we really wanted to do with this film as well, where there's like loads of little moments that you might only catch on a second viewing. Like literally the opening shot, she turns the key and you see some scars on her wrist. And it's a tiny little detail that, you know, flashes on the screen for like half a second. But I think if you rewatch it knowing how the film ends, you pick up on these little bits and you're like, it was so obvious what was going to happen. Like we should have known the entire time,
I
but
didn't see it
you
coming.
don't.
And,
Yeah,
but it proved something. So many audiences who have seen this film who will probably say the same thing, I didn't see that coming, mimics real life, because when something like that happens, we're all going, why? The thing is this, we're not understanding the depth of their grief. Here's the thing, I don't care if it's depression, grief, or whatever. People know how to put on a mask. And because of that mask, we're all geared to judge a book by its cover. We don't take time to look inside past the cover. And that's what happened with Sage in this film. Nobody looked past her outside, but the signs were there, but nobody chose to actually pay attention to them.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think, as you said, like people are so good at putting on a mask to show to others, but I think also to protect themselves and building up those walls as high as possible to stay in what's their comfort zone at that point. But yeah, as you say, like in retrospective, you're always like, oh, there were signs, there were things someone mentioned, there were things someone did, but I never thought it was that bad. So that was kind of a reoccurring theme that we really wanted to kind of weave into the film. So there's so many little repetitions. I mean, the gunshot scene and the final scene mirror each other in so many ways in terms of camera movement. The music, like the score, is doing the exact same thing because I was like, I really want people to understand or have a kind of gut feeling when they see the frame of Hailey, the friend, of what they might see in the next minute, because they've kind of seen it before in the flashback scene with the gunshot. So yeah, there's loads of little moments that mirror each other.
Well, her friend should have been a little should have been more focused, because when Sage leaves the pub and then you had the camera shot on her friend should have put two and two together.
Yeah,
And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Because you've known for a year,
yeah,
and then you tell her, I'm not going to take no for an answer, which means you already knew the thought was she's going to tell you no. So you
mm,
already knew she was already in this alternative imagination that made her comfortable, but the friend should have known. And that goes back to all of us.
yeah,
We all live in our own selfish lives, and we don't take time to truly pay attention. And we need to realize, if someone lost someone and they appear happy and they appear fine, we all know how to wear a mask.
yeah,
And we need to start looking past that. And that's the beauty of this film, because you left no stone unturned in covering grief and its possible outcome, as well as those that are around the person, like her friend who should have known better.
yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. It was really interesting. We've had someone in a screening actually say, like, "Oh, I feel like it needs a sequel now that looks at the friend and how she copes."
Yeah, yeah. You idiot. But you made her blonde.
Yeah.
I'm just joking, ladies and gentlemen. I know this isn't joking, but it's film. Remember, it's also film. But and with the word film, the moment this film actually started, the cinematography caught my eye. Who was the cinematographer? Because it was fantastic.
Yeah, it's my good friend Lorraine Deportes, and I've known her for quite a while, and she's fantastic. We've worked on quite a few commercial projects together, and yeah, she brings such a beautiful eye to everything she shoots. I mean, I love her work, and I think with every project you need someone that's obviously amazing at what they're doing and can really bring that story alive, but also someone you just are on the same wavelength with, and you have that sort of bond of trust and an established relationship. She knows how I work, I know how she works. And so yeah, it was so fun to try and create these worlds. And obviously with a short film you have such limited means in terms of what you can afford to get, and you try to get everything for everyone, but you always have to compromise somehow. And she's so good of making the most out of very little. I mean, the bar scene is so stunning, and we're working in this tiny little pub with like low ceilings that were a nightmare for her to light, and we had so little time. I mean, the entire shoot. So she had to be so creative and quick with every single decision she was making. But yeah, she's fantastic, and it's just so great to work with good friends on set as well. It just changes the entire dynamic on the shoot, to make everyone feel comfortable and have a good time at the end of the day. You know, we all want to have a great time when shooting.
Yeah, because the thing that caught my eye on the cinematography is when Sage stepped outside her grandmother's house and she was just
Mm,
standing there, and I was looking at the shot going, wow, this is great. But then you have the music score,
mm.
which was perfect.
So funnily enough, so it's my partner who scored it, and he doesn't work in film. He's a music producer, so he works obviously in music, but he, makes songs with artists, and I just always use him whenever I need a score for something, because I'm like, you're great at it. You should do so much more of it. And yeah, it was great to work with him because I know so little about music. I think we can say nothing. I know nothing about music. And when it came to this, like the only thing I knew was that reoccurring theme that I wanted for the gunshot scene and the final scene. And my reference was, in All Quiet on the Western Front, there's this great like do do do, and it's so foreboding. I don't remember exactly at what part of the film it's introduced, but whenever you hear those notes, you just know something horrible is about to happen, and it just fills you with dread. And I knew that I wanted to do something like that, that connects that flashback scene with the end, and that it had to be super simple and recognizable for it to work. And the rest, I was like, I'm not really sure what we do. We'll figure it out. So we were editing, and I knew I wanted the score to kind of come in when she comes home, and for the rest to be quite naturalistic, just sound design heavy. And we were editing the scene of her and her boyfriend on the sofa. And in the last editing session, Oscar, the composer, was there for some reason. And me and my editor Serena, we were like, okay, I think we're there. Let's watch it back. And we all sat there and we're like, feels pretty long. But we thought it was there. So I was like, okay, I made this playlist for Genevieve and I put The Nature of Daylight by Max Richter on it, which is obviously one of the most well-known, most beautiful pieces of music that's used in like every film you can think of. So I was like, let's just put that on. I feel like it's the right sort of vibe for it. Let's see how the scene feels with music. And we put it on and all three of us were crying. So I was like, okay, cool. With music, this is going to work. But obviously now I'm also giving Oscar like the hardest reference I could possibly give him, being like the bar is mile high now of like, okay, this is how sad it needs to be. And yeah, he just kind of went on and like played around and would send me new versions every now and then, and I'd give some notes. But yeah, that was pretty much all. I can not take any credit for that. um,
Yeah, it was the score. The score is perfect for this film, and I also understand that 50% of your production crew was women and those that identify as non-binary. Why was that important to you?
you know what? It's something that wasn't something we aimed for. Um, I mean, in my everyday work with commercials and fashion, I always, try to get as many women involved as possible because I started out in camera department. I was a camera trainee for a couple of years, and there were so many instances where I was the only woman on set, and I was like, that's kind of strange. There's so many talented women out there. Why aren't they here? So I always try to get a lot of female crew involved. And with this film, I made a spreadsheet, very German of me, with all my ideal crew, like just everyone I'd love to work with, mainly people I've worked with before. So I made this kind of wish list. And at some point, I stepped back and I looked at it and I was like, pretty much all of the HODs are women. Just because I've had good experiences working with them. Like my editor Serena, she's incredible. I get her on every single project I can afford her on. So obviously she was going to be my first choice when it comes to edit. Same with my colorist. I've been working with them since the very beginning. The first project we worked on was a music video in their bedroom, and we were grading on a laptop that wasn't calibrated, and we put like a blanket over our heads to create like a dark space to try and see. So we've really like grown together, and we've got such a good relationship, and I've learned so much from them. So obviously that's someone I wanted to bring on board. But yeah, it was just people I enjoyed working with, whose work I admire, who I get on well with, and who I thought would be really good for the story. And I've read the statistics somewhere that obviously once you hire a lot of female HODs, it's so much more likely that they will hire female assistants, or that their departments will not only be men. So that kind of just happened naturally. It wasn't something we necessarily aimed for. But I think there's so many amazing female crew members out there that deserve to get all these amazing jobs, which unfortunately they have to fight really hard for when they shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah.
Yeah, there's, I know the word diversity can be a very bad word for a lot of people, but the film industry, there is quite a bit of
It's a long
diversity.
way to go.
Yeah, and well, yeah, and it has a long way to go to the top, but it's the indie filmmaker that proves that we have a lot of diversity. Diversity works. It's
Yeah.
embraced. And I'm blessed with the fact that I get to talk to people from all over the world, and I get to hear everybody's stories, how their films were made, and it's just remarkable, So to get to the top, yeah, in the film industry at the very top, yeah, there's not a whole lot of diversity.
Yeah.
Still to this day, there's not, but thank goodness for the indie filmmaker because they're the heart and soul of this whole industry. And
100%. And you watch so many great short films or independent films, and they're amazing. They're so well done, and it just shows that there's no excuse for why most years all the nominees for the Oscar in cinematography are usually men, and there's no reason why that's the case
well,
because there's so many amazing female DPs.
I'll tell you this: out of I've seen so much film, but one of my favorite cinematographers is a woman.
Who is
I mean,
it?
if I was to direct my own short film, I know who I'm calling. And it won't be a guy cinematographer because I know this woman's work and it's impeccable. And so, but yeah,
Yeah, I think
you know,
especially like it's so easy to find diverse crew. I think when people say like, "Oh, there wasn't anyone X Y Z," it just shows that they're lazy. Like there's so many amazing groups or pages on Instagram that focus on, you know, women or non-binary people in post-production or cinematographers of color or like this. It's so easy, you have so many resources at hand to find amazing work and like broaden your own circle, that there's no excuse to not do that.
yeah, because I mean, right off the top of my head, I can think of filmmakers from Vietnam,
Mm.
China, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Canada, US, London, France, Germany, Spain, Ireland, LGBTQ, Colombia. I mean, the list goes on. And I've
Yeah.
talked to all of them.
Yeah.
And the level of talent, the level of creativity is off the chart. So if I hear somebody go, I can't do that because, and they use their ethnic group, culture, or religion as an excuse because they can't, they're in the wrong business. Because in film, if you're an independent filmmaker, you make your chance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. 100%. No, it's all about that and like grabbing the chances as they come and creating those pathways. And then, hopefully doing the same for others because, if you're struggling with something, then there's probably hundreds of other people struggling with the exact same issue that you're having.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was interviewing an actor yesterday and we got to talk about their whole cast. And their
Mm.
whole cast is black, Indian, white, gay. I mean, it's like multicolored friends. And it was really cool to watch because when you're watching the whole series, you're not sitting there picking people out because they're different. You're just looking at the whole cast because you're like, hey, this is really funny because it's a comedy, and you liked all the characters. So it didn't
Yeah, yeah,
matter what they look like.
exactly. Exactly.
But you have one very powerful, emotional film, Diary of a Ghost. that if people will watch this film and watch it correctly, they're going to learn some things to be a better human.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. So now is this film still going to be in its festival run into 2025?
Yeah, yeah, we're still going to do a few months, and then planning for it to go live in spring next year. So still a few months to go. Um, but yeah, I'm just trying to get as many people as possible to see it on a big screen rather than watch it on their phone on the way to work. So yeah, hopefully a few more festival announcements to come and screenings in different cities. But yeah, it'll be online next year.
I love that. And ladies and gentlemen, stop watching short films on your phone. I That is one thing I will not do. You know, my computer screen is pretty large, so I watch it there. And of course, I know about the film festivals, but yeah, you can't get the same feeling, and you can't get the idea with a phone because some people's going to pause it and check Instagram in the middle of
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
so easy to get distracted. And I think especially that's what I'm trying to get everyone out with to come to the cinema and like trying to do as many Q&As afterwards so people actually engage in a conversation afterwards and not just, move on doing whatever they need to do. And that's been really rewarding. Like we've had so many nice conversations with people and I think that really um, yeah, just adds to the experience of them watching the film, like hearing us speak afterwards and being able to ask questions and meeting the cast. And yeah, I think, you work on a short film for such a long time, you've got to make the most out of the experience before putting it online.
yeah, but this is a film that will teach people how to be a better person, a better human, to show more empathy.
Mhm.
And like you said earlier, to be more aware of the signs. They're not going to be obvious. Grief does not give us obvious signs from the person that's suffering. Like I said, they're going to wear a mask. They're going to act like they're okay because they don't want to be a burden to somebody else. But that's not the way they should be thinking. We should be thinking that we need to be helping them because they're carrying a burden. They're thinking they're being one.
That's such a that I couldn't have said that better. Such a no, it's such a big difference that yeah, just you're not a burden. You're just carrying one yourself, and you can. There's no shame in asking for help in carrying that burden.
That's very, very true. And ladies and gentlemen, you need to realize that 1 in 4 people suffer from mental health problems, such as with a particular spike in young women. Only 1 in 3 affected are actively seeking treatment. What exactly grief does to the human body and mind isn't fully understood yet. It's an experience everybody goes through at some point in their lives, and even though we all do, we often do so alone. Prolonged grief disorder is persistent, disabling, a form of grief, and a fairly unexplored condition. It exists in millions of people, so it's common, even though we don't see the outside signs of it. But this film, Diary of a Ghost, delves into the poignant odyssey of Sage, a young woman grappling with the profound loss of her first love, Riley. Now, a year after his passing, Sage retreats into isolation within her grandmother's house, where eccentric behaviors and an immersive diary, this is important in this film, that paint a portrait of her struggle. But in this self-imposed seclusion, the diary becomes a portal to an imaginary realm where Riley's ghost persists, a manifestation of Sage's pain. But the diary's pages are linked to a deadline. Once the final chapter is written, Riley will depart, forcing Sage to face an unaltered reality as she battles her own constructive world. The arrival of her estranged friend Hailey adds a new dimension to Sage's emotional turmoil. Now, Diary of a Ghost explores the impact of grief on the human psyche, delving into the universal yet uniquely personal experience of silently dealing with pain, scars, and the quiet struggle for acceptance. And Carrie, again, I want to thank you so much for sharing this very powerful, moving, emotional film with us today, which I truly believe will have repercussions, positive repercussions in people in many months, if not years to come, because this is a film that goes far beyond the festival season.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It means a lot to me. And thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And you're welcome back anytime. So I can't wait to see what your next film project will bring. And we can talk about that as well. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for watching. And remember, if you are dealing with grief, seek help. You're not being a burden on somebody. You're the one carrying that burden. And you need to ask for help so it can be carried away correctly and safely, and hopefully with empathy and love. So, as for me, ladies and gentlemen, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.